All right, let's go straight to a discussion to this historic moment and others looking back at the just concluded direct qualifiers for African teams heading to the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Joining me here in studio is football journalist Eric Njiru, who's based right here in Nairobi, and coming to us live from Cairo is sports analyst Marwan Saeed. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us for this discussion program. Eric, I'll start with you. The biggest story from Africa, of course, is Cape Verde. What impact will their historic qualification to the World Cup have on the so-called smaller African nations in years to come?
Well, I think this nation is an encouragement to all the nations that are taking part in qualification. If you look at like our country in Kenya, we played them like 10 or 11 years ago and we had a chance to beat them. They have just played their first AFCON from 2013, and now you can see what they did last year in Ivory Coast. Though in the quarterfinals, they played quite well. Now they're going to the World Cup. Every nation, when they see this story, they'll be like, well, you can make it. Now up to 10 teams can make it to the World Cup. 9 direct slots and 1 more through the playoffs. And when you go to the next qualifiers, that is in 2030, going to Morocco, Spain, and Portugal, people will be like, look, last time out, Cape Verde were in the US. We can make it. Look at all these groups. A lot of teams had a chance to make it until the final day. In Kenya, we finished somewhere very close to the guys who are going to playoffs,
right.
Which means if you had a good coach, let's say at the beginning of these qualifiers, would have made it very far.
Okay. Marwan, let me bring you in now. What do you expect from the Blue Sharks next year? Could they continue their fairy tale in North America, or do you think it might be a bridge too far for them after they've received the worldwide pressure, so to speak, on the world stage?
Look, I have to say I'm happy for Cape Verde, obviously the second smallest nation to ever qualify to the World Cup. It makes us proud as Africans to see such teams and such efforts being rewarded at the end. Obviously, they were on the rise the past few years. We've seen them at the AFCON, at the previous AFCON. So it doesn't come much of a surprise that they were able to make it to the World Cup. 500,000 people or just above that, a team was able to make this nation happy. They deserve it. I still remember when Iceland qualified to the World Cup and their fans, and how it was the black horse story and the thunderclaps from their fans in the stadiums. So it's something that's very refreshing to see it happen actually from Africa. And I'm not going to say I have hopes where they can reach far stages in the World Cup, but at the end of the day, it's such a proud achievement for this nation and this size in regards to population that we have to just commend it and just clap for them and hope for the best.
Right. Eric, let's talk about other unfancied nations like Gabon, like Benin and Mauritania. They came so close to the promised land. Does this maybe signify that there's a change in African football, in the African football landscape, or is this maybe a one-off?
Well, I think international football is changing right now. Like we've seen, the African qualifiers are very interesting. They're better than the European qualifiers, to be honest. Every single game that was played, every single round was interesting to watch on TV. Guys are talking about it. People have been talking about boring European qualifiers because it's always 6-0, 4-0. But the qualifiers now in Africa have been very close. If you look at Gabon, they scored really good goals. The game they played in Nairobi, I think 3-4 when they played the Gambia, that tells you every team felt that we have a chance to do it. From the last AFCON, we saw Nigeria, we saw all teams that were in Cameroon quarterfinalists being knocked out, and now those ones who came to Ivory Coast, they were able now to tell the story and show that, yes, the sports scene right now in Africa is changing. The players who are now playing in Europe, more players. We've seen Minte from the Gambia come here to Nairobi twice and properly ball. He started playing for Brighton this weekend, and that tells you we've got stars from across the continent. And I think they'll be encouraged, like Gabon, to go to the playoffs when they go to Morocco and try and qualify for the World Cup. And like you've said, also countries like Mauritania, we've seen the amount of work that has been done by the FIFA Forward, those projects in all these countries. And I think people now want to be part of this football because we've seen nations go to the World Cup or the Euros like Iceland, and they go and stand the world. Why can't we African teams go there and do that? And I do think this coming World Cup, you'll see a lot of good African teams.
Interesting. Marwan, let me ask the same question to you. Is there maybe a change on the horizon for African football?
Look, I think these qualifiers were very interesting to watch. They were the qualifiers of such great stories like the Cape Verde story. There were qualifiers where we've had certain drama happen, like with South Africa, and there were the qualifiers of disappointments, where we see countries like Nigeria and Cameroon now find themselves in a difficult position where they have to battle it out for one spot. So all in all, if you were looking at it as a spectator, you would be very much entertained. It was a very good showing for African football, because people generally, when they think of African football, they always assume that the top guns will always qualify to the big tournaments. We've seen countries like Nigeria, Cameroon, Tunisia, they reach the World Cup on a regular basis. So now to have these dramatical effects added into the qualifiers, I believe it's a very good addition to African football, to the image of African football, and we have to see what's going to happen with that last spot, because honestly, it's going to be very entertaining in my opinion.
Very interesting insights. Gentlemen, let's take a quick pause for now. Do stick around as we continue our discussion. First, let's remind ourselves just who is qualified for the 2026 World Cup and who made it to the four-nation playoffs in Morocco next month following the conclusion of the Continental World Cup qualifiers earlier this week. All right, let's keep the discussion going on the World Cup qualifiers. Football journalist Eric Njiru is still here with me in studio, as well as sports analyst Marwan Saeed, who joins us live from Cairo. Marwan, let's go to you first this time. North Africa, as we've heard, once again have claimed most of the automatic World Cup tickets to underline their supremacy in African football. The question now is, which among the four, that's Morocco, Egypt, Algeria and Tunisia, do you see going furthest next year?
I think there's one team that screams out that they are as a nation, or as a footballing nation at the moment, they are on another level. Their under 20 team is going to play in a couple of days against Argentina in the World Cup final. We're looking at them where they finished fourth in the last World Cup. Morocco, obviously, they are moving in a path that is much more superior in terms of any football nation in Africa at the moment. They're achieving things always with the national team this past period. Their players even abroad, like Achraf Hakimi, who is captaining actually PSG, Paris Saint-Germain at some times. So it's really unfair to all the other African or North African nations to be compared to Morocco at the moment. But if any team is able to have an effect on this World Cup or to shock the world, it's the team that has the experience of doing so when they did it the last World Cup. So obviously Morocco has to be the one.
All right, Eric, let me come to you to talk about the East and Central African region. Only the Democratic Republic of Congo made it to the second round out of this region. Why is it that this part of the continent seems to be getting left behind while other parts of the continent seem to continue to thrive?
You know, you don't just wake up and qualify for the World Cup. There's a lot of work that is done 10, 15 years. Like Marwa said, I mean, look at Morocco. They're going to the final of the Under-20 World Cup, I think, on Sunday morning. And Argentina. For these teams to be where they are, they've done this work for so many years. Morocco, the same. Egypt, the same. Nigeria have been football giants. Cameroon, Ivory Coast. But for us in East Africa, we have to look at ourselves and say, do we really want to go to do, first of all, are we consistent enough in the AFCON? Because by the time we go to the World Cup, we have to be very consistent in the AFCON. But in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, we're not that very consistent. The same with Ethiopia, Somalia, and Eritrea and other teams. So we have to be really like intentional with the youth teams, let's say from the under-19, under-17, under-20, under-23, all these players, unless you can have a plan of like 8 to 12 years. Because you have to plan first to, let's say, to get the quarters or the semis of the AFCON. before now thinking of qualifying for the World Cup. I don't think many East Africans wake up and say, this year I think we can qualify for the World Cup. I don't think they fancy our chances because they know we've not done enough preparations from the past to be able to stand a chance to qualify for the World Cup. Because these nations like Morocco, Algeria, they've got pros. Almost everyone plays in Europe. They have good players, they have good systems, they have the good youth system. And I think it's a lot that we can learn from them.
All right. Yeah. Plenty of work to be done from grassroots level, of course, going upwards. Marwan, piggybacking on what Eric has said there, we've seen the North African teams, including your Egypt, the Pharaohs, turn to local coaches, Hossam Hassan this time around, and former internationals to fire them to the World Cup. Do you back these coaches to then go on and lead their teams out of the group stage of the World Cup, or do they maybe need to look for more experienced international managers?
Honestly, if we look at the most successful national team managers that we've had El Gohari, we've had Hassan Shahata, who's won 3 AFCONs in a row. So it has always been an Egyptian national team coach that took us to glory. Our main failures were always coming at the expense of the World Cup, of us not qualifying for the World Cup. But I think the teams around us have taken a leaf out of the book of Morocco, where they've seen Walid Al-Regragui. He's doing very well with Morocco at the moment. And I will be honest with you, in terms of Egypt, everyone here that watches Egyptian football and watches the national team, they will tell you, I think even if you speak to some of the players, they will tell you that Hossam Hassan, he might not be the best tactician that they've worked under, but what he brings different is the spirit, is that he's from this nation, is that the push, the motivational push that he gives the players to perform and to raise the country's flag up high. This is not something that a foreign coach can actually transmit to the players. And in addition, we've seen that with Tunisia as well, where they have a Tunisian legend coach them. Egypt, they have an Egyptian legend coaching them. So these people know what it's like to perform for Egypt, to achieve things with Egypt. So to mentor some of these players and to make them feel actually the pride of carrying your nation, this is not something that can come from a foreign coach. And in many situations before, we've seen that spirit can actually carry you much more than tactically or technical ability wise in competitions. And Hossam Hassan, he brings that to the national team in Egypt. Tunisia's coach, he brings that to them. Morocco is a little bit different because they have players of a high level, but still having that national personality from this nation, it brings much pride when you achieve it rather than with a foreign coach.
Right. Eric, briefly before we take a quick break, do you maybe think, tricky question here, do you maybe think that the CAF qualifying process is skewed in favor of North African teams, as maybe has been echoed before?
I don't think so, because qualifying depends on the ranking. When this draw was done, I think in 2023, the pots were based on the ranking. And rankings, you don't just arrive there in two or three games. I mean, you have to win your games, you have to build consistency for some time for you to be up there. And these North African teams, who, like Morocco, they've lost us to South Africa. Like, let's say in 2 games, we saw the last AFCON was won by Ivory Coast and they played Nigeria in the final. The other one was won by Senegal. They won it. The final that Algeria won, I think Senegal won in the final. So that tells you, even the other side of Africa, they still have the ability to go there and win these games and win this process. So for me, I do think there's nothing you can do about it. It's about ranking. You just have to win your games and find yourself up there.
Right, let's round off our discussion. I'm still here with Eric Njiru and Marwan Saeed. Gentlemen, we're almost out of time here, but I have one final question for both of you. Very briefly, we have Gabon, Nigeria, Cameroon, and the Democratic Republic of Congo going for that one ticket. Who do you see getting that ticket? Marwan, I'll begin with you, 1 minute or less.
I think obviously it has to be Nigeria, because not only because they have better players in my opinion, but they were taking the qualifiers in a much more serious way, even though they qualified barely in the end. But if you look at Cameroon, you can't, it looks like they did not take it seriously enough. You can't go to qualifiers hoping to qualify to the World Cup drawing 4 or 5 games. It's not a good look. They are not ripe as much as Nigeria, and I think that fight for Nigeria to qualify after missing out will be much higher than Cameroon.
All right, Eric, do you agree?
Well, I think yes, Nigeria should have everything to win these playoffs, but you know, your form in September is different in November, like you've seen in African qualifiers. We've been disappointed with Cameroon, let's say, in the last couple of qualifiers because they have drawn way too many games. They have the quality to win games, but they've not been winning games. The other team is Gabon. Gabon, I think they've played here in Kenya twice. We've seen them. They've been quite exciting. They beat us. They beat the Gambia, but also they let in too many goals. So I think Nigeria should be able to take advantage of that. But I'm saying should because we know how things work here, and we cannot write anyone off, especially Cameroon, La Continent. They have a reason why they're the biggest, probably the biggest team in Africa after Egypt.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. All pressure on the Super Eagles. Thank you very much for joining us on this discussion. Our football journalist, Eric Njiru, as well as sports analyst, Marwan Saeed. Thank you very much as well for joining us on this edition of Sports Scene. Do remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen and follow us as well on all our digital media platforms.